What is going on, guys? Joey Francis here at Flex Training Systems. Today, should you adjust your training time to sync with meet day? Now, I hear a lot of people talk about if you're going to compete at 8 in the morning, maybe you weigh in at 6 a.m., should you change your training to lift at 8 in the morning? Or maybe similar. So that way you can like peak better or whatever. I'm going to talk about it. We're going to talk about pros, cons, is it even possible? I'm going to give some examples and then the conclusion, as you guys can see on the screen. So some pros of potentially doing this. One, mental benefit. So if it makes you feel better mentally that you're going to be training similar to the time that you're going to be competing, that placebo may be strong enough to warrant the change, but in my opinion, it may not. But everybody's different. I'm leaning towards not for people that I have influence over, but for maybe other people, perhaps. Also, your body may potentially feel better lifting at that time. I have found, if you train too late in the day, that can be a downer, right? You're going to just not feel as good as if you were to train earlier in the day. If you train too early, you might not be warm enough, etc., this and that. I will say for me personally, my last Arnold that I did, we were supposed to lift in the afternoon, and because of COVID, they had to like condense us, so they moved us up to the morning. And I squatted like 750 early as shit in the morning. Like my body was not even awake yet, and it sucked, but I did it, and that was my plan.
Oh my god, I'm nuts!
And could I have hit maybe 5 kilos more if it was later in the day? Probably. But some of the cons to adjusting my training to sync up with meet day. What I would have to do to my training to make accommodations to train that early in the morning the cons far outweigh what my benefit could be on meet day. Does that make sense? Would you rather have your entire life disrupted? You have to move everything around. You got to go to bed super early. Like you're literally doing all these things to try to lift, super early in the morning just so you can sync up with meet day for a debatable impact on your total, right? It's debatable. Now, if you train at 10 p.m. and you're going to compete at 1 p.m., maybe you go a little bit earlier, maybe 5 p.m., something like that, right? Or if you train at 12 and you're going to lift in the morning, it's probably not that big of a difference. In my opinion, every situation and everyone's different, and you got to kind of look at where everyone's at and try to figure it out, right? I will say this, though. For Worlds, right, it's not even possible for some people to make the accommodations to lift at that time. For example, if you're, or even if it's not Worlds, what if you're just out of town, right? I don't know, and you're competing or something. If you're gonna lift at freaking 3 a.m., over there, what are you gonna do, right? You're not gonna do anything because there's just you know what I'm saying? Like, you're not gonna make any changes at all. And what people need to understand and realize is this is where the real keys come in. Is that when I do my tapers, I think about hours. I don't think so much about days, right? When I think about hours, if I have my lifter peaked, I say, okay, there's going to be like a 12 to 24 hour period where you're going to be as strong as you possibly can be, and you compete somewhere in that time frame. Maybe something happens and you have to go a little bit outside of that. The strength that you would lose from that is very, very, very minimal. It's not even probably not even detectable in some cases. And what people need to understand is, let's say you lift at 5 p.m. every day and you taper to peak around that time, but you're gonna, something happens and you have to compete, the competition gets moved to the next morning or something like that. So what? You get 12 extra hours, whatever, 16 extra hours of rest. You know what I mean? The recovery is gonna happen. You're gonna feel the best that you've ever felt. And the boost you're going to get, or you should get, from your taper and eating more and all these things leading into a competition, in my opinion, is going to far offset the negative impact of potentially having to train early in the morning or whatever, right? You oftentimes I go to bed the night before a competition and I'm just restless. Like I have so much energy. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rip a door off or something. You know what I'm saying? Um, so when I wake up in the morning, I have tons of energy and I'm ready to compete. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it's gonna even itself out. And in my opinion, it's not worth changing your whole life around to try to wake up super early to just so you can sync up with meet day. And look at all the if any U.S. International lifter has done well in a weird time zone. You know what I mean? I promise you, they didn't wake up at 3 a.m. to train. They did not. It's just not practical. You know what I mean? For practicality reasons. There's plenty of examples of lifters hitting their all-time best PRs, competing at what would be, 3 in the morning for them. Now, granted, they're going to get there a little bit earlier, but I'm going to tell you guys this. I was in Sweden for about a week, and my sleep did not even out. It just did not even out. I was waking up at weird times. I was waking up at like 3 in the morning over there. Like it was just I did not adjust. After 1 week, I did not adjust. So maybe that's just me personally. But I think it has way less of an impact than people think. Thank you so much for the followers, guys. Has way less of an impact than people think, and I think if you're doing your taper correctly, like I said, the benefits of this are definitely going to impact it. Now, if it's not too big of a deal, and like let's say you train early in the morning all the time because of work, and you know that your next competition is going to be later in the day, I don't think it would hurt. I like to lean more towards, instead of pulling things up, which could lead to potential for a couple of days your training is going to be weird because like you're getting less recovery. I would rather push it later if possible. But in my opinion, your training should put you in a position to lift the most amount of weight possible and be successful there, if that makes sense. Okay? And if your taper is done correctly, it is going to offset whatever time, whether you squat on a Friday and your meet is on Friday, or you squat on a Saturday and your meet is on Saturday. There's so many other factors that are going to they're going to negate that, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of energy kind of goes into that when it doesn't really need to. If you're you have super high frequency type deal with the lifter, in my opinion, it may benefit you. I'm talking 5 times a week bench, 3 times a week squat, 2 to 3 times a week deadlift. It might benefit you to sync that up. Time of day, don't even worry about it, but sync the day up. Just because you're not going to be, whereas like with the big lifter, if you're taking 5 days off, 4 days off, recovery is going to happen during that time. It's going to kind of wash it out. But for one of those type of lifters, is a little bit more important. I still think that if you just work backwards from the competition day and taper things correctly, regardless, it's going to even out. But I could potentially see that being more of a factor. I hope that makes sense. There's a lot of really useful stuff there in terms of tapers and things like that. Some examples. I already talked about Worlds. So literally any of my lifters that have gone to Worlds, myself at the Arnold, do you even really need examples? So in conclusion, I kind of just gave it to you guys. I think it can, if you can make accommodations and it doesn't compromise the integrity of your training and diminish your ability to have productive training sessions, yeah, sure, try it. It's not going to be that big of a deal whether you do or not, as long as the taper is done correctly. Hell, you could even taper a tiny bit earlier if you know you have to wake up sooner, right, and pull things back some. I've had people compete on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturday, Sunday. You know what I mean? Basically every day of the week, and it's always worked out fine. As long as you do things right, kind of those last 3 weeks leading into it, you should be okay. All right, we're going to do another video right after this. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hashtag don't overthink in the comments down below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.